Hi again, guys. Thanks again for the feedback for the previous video there, and just wanted to share a little bit more with you today about the risk taking. So, part two of risk taking, you could say. I was talking to you a little bit yesterday in the car as I was travelling, thinking about risk, and I thought about it a bit more overnight. And as I was woke this morning, and I thought it's interesting that as people that have within them the greatest source of life in the sense of Christ in us, the hope of glory, we take so little risks. We're so risk averse, you know. I remember, and it's kind of a bit of a joke at times, but you know, it's like the churches talk about kind of rearranging deck chairs, you know, on the Titanic, that kind of analogy where basically you sort of, I can remember one church we were at like years and years ago, and I suggested to the pastor and his wife that maybe we should just, rather than having a, you know, sort of a Sunday night meeting that was a repeat of the Sunday morning, why don't we sit around and, you know, rearrange the chairs and, you know, have a bit of a discussion type thing where we can sort of talk, you know, on the same level rather than someone sort of preaching down at us, you know, like simple thing. You wouldn't believe the uproar that happened around that. It was like I was asking to, you know, throw Christ out the door or something in the response to such a small move. Like, are we seriously that risk averse that was a thing? Now, that was a pretty small fundamentalist group, so I can understand that. But then many, many years later, I was at an AOG church, and been there a while, so people knew me, they knew what I was about, they understood that I had a passion to work with men and to see men become, you know, who they were in Christ, to see that they had a real, you know, part to play, right? So rather than them sitting down at this men's meeting that was, you know, your once a month standard men's breggy thing where you just kind of roll up and let's get a guest speaker in and we'll pull someone that, you know, knows something and we'll bring some knowledge to you men, you know. You men need more knowledge. Anyway, so I suggested, listen, I've done this before. I was at a church previously where I used to do it quite regularly, and we'd sit down and we'd grab a whiteboard and we'd talk to the guys and say, what is it that you think, you know, is relevant to you and to us and to, you know, your walk with God? What is it that, you know, can change? I think it was the beginning of the year or something maybe, and we said, what do you think we can change? What do you think we can do better as men? How are we going to do this? You know, I had the pen and the whiteboard and everything all ready for this Saturday morning. I roll up there, and one of the guys who was sort of leading the group comes up to me and he says, Tony, got to have a word with you, mate. And I said, oh, yeah, what's going on, Dave? He says, listen, mate, the pastor's had a word with me. He says he doesn't want you to do this. And I said, what do you mean? He said, oh, no, it's just not good, guys asking questions. He said, it's not, you know, we can't do that here. And I was like, I was dumbfounded. Honestly, I was absolutely dumbfounded. I just threw me right off, and I was sort of like kind of in shock. I said, well, why not? He said, oh, it's just, you know, could get out of control, or it could be. There was no real explanation, just that basically, hey, we are so risk averse here that we can't get a bunch of men that come to this church every week to sit down and have a talk with each other. And I was like, you know, that for me was just like one of the final straws and made me realise and understand just how risk averse churches had become, how risk averse we were as a people, and how no wonder we were just like dying basically in this little small story where everything was, you know, under control, and the pastors had to veto or say yay to anything that was going to be happening, you know, and it had to be, I think, pretty much filtered through, almost through the mouth of this particular leader. And you could just see how it had kept people in this real immaturity stage where they weren't able to ask questions. Now, questions are risky. I have no doubt about that. Asking questions is a risky business because guess what? We don't have all the answers, and we feel like we should have. We've sort of come up with this brand of Christianity where we thought we should have all the answers. Well, we don't have all the answers, and we don't need all the answers, and we don't need to be experts to be able to open up questioning. In fact, how do we learn? We learn by questioning, and it's sort of like the opposite in a sense. If we open up for questioning where we don't have the answers, And if we don't know what people are wanting to know, we say to them, well, hey, man, let's check this out. Let's explore. Let's go deeper and find out. Let's ask God. Let's ask others. Let's listen to those that have wisdom in these areas who've gone before us. It's just so insane, this whole, we've been in other churches, like we've been around a number of different churches, different denominations. We've been in sort of Protestant, straight mainline ones. We've been in, Pentecostal. We've been in fundamentalist ones. Been in very, like a Churches of Christ, which was very open to people's ideas. So we learnt that it was okay to question. And, the things that people worry about, oh, can we sing that song here? Can we use that type of music? Can we, seriously, the world's dying out there from, depression and mental illness. There's just people struggling with broken relationships and marriage and drug addiction and you name it. And here we are arguing over small minutiae, tiny details that honestly are pathetic. And we got to name it as, these things are pathetic, a waste of time, and they're not changing the world. They're not helping, they're not spreading good news. They're actually basically, it's frightening. It's frightening if you were to have these conversations with someone out there that was, making a difference in the world, they would just go, what? Is that what you guys talk about at these meetings? Have you ever been to a business meeting? Like, I'm sure some of you have been to these meetings at churches. I was part of eldership group and so forth, and some of the stuff that goes on in these meetings for hours, you're just debating minutiae, tiny little details, problematic little things that have to be sorted out, and you're like, oh my goodness, is this what we are about, people? Seriously, it's frightening. It really is frightening. We're not changing the world. We're not making a difference. We're not, feeding the poor. We're not, we're doing that in part, but that's not our mainstream. We're not, welcoming in the refugees. We're not changing and shifting the culture at a very deep level. We're not impacting the world with love. We're actually focusing on these minor details, and we're like so pedantic about what they are. You know what I mean? Like, we'll battle over changing, there's another classic one, was the old painting of the church scenario. Oh no, I like the old colour of the paint and it's been like that for so long. Or there's always that some woman in the kitchen that's been there for years that doesn't want to change the way we serve the morning teas or something, and there's this big debate about whether we can talk to her and say, oh, would it be okay if we did this now and we changed the way we did this? And she's sort of berating the little kids saying, hey, don't touch those biscuits, they're for the adults, and you're like, seriously, is this a place of love and hope for people? We're so risk averse. We don't want to change. We want to keep the status quo, and it's just not going to do anything unless we wake up to what is real and what needs to be changed. Things will just remain the same. So this breakout that we're having, this movement away that people are just leaving the church in droves, is such a good thing. And while it might appear to some as a kind of a nightmare scenario where everything's collapsing, the finances are going down, we're losing people by the multitudes, it's because there hasn't been an opportunity for people to grow. They've grown, I was talking about this the other day, to the glass ceiling. They've gone as far as they can go, and without taking risks, asking questions, deep questions about real meaningful subjects that need to be addressed. How do we accept those that are different than us, for example? That's a classic one. We've become so small in our thinking that anyone... I had a story the other day about a friend's brother who had this passion back in the day to bring, I think they were either homeless people, Indigenous folks, particularly from their town, to the church that he was brought up in. And he went and got himself a bus, and he was like excited and passionate. He got a few people to go, let's go out and pick up some people off the street and bring them into church, share the love of Jesus with them, and he's like, yes. Anyway, he goes out and, fixes up this old van, bus thing, picks up people, starts bringing them to church 1 week, 2 weeks, 3, and then there's, the inevitable meeting that comes up. Excuse me, Trevor, would you mind not bringing those people anymore? They kind of stink, they're all out there smoking cigarettes, and they're just not like us, they just don't fit here, mate. Can you do this somewhere else? That's the work, your work, you do it. We're happy for you to do it, but just don't do it here. We don't like change. We don't like to take... These people are risky. They could steal things. They could, undermine our comfort, you know. And you're like, oh, just like, oh man, seriously, you know, like, is this not a small story of what we are doing on a larger scale? Have a look at the church. It's middle class, it's boring, it's, you know, it's very exclusive. People don't fit there. People that have got a story, people that are coming in that are a bit rough around the edges, they're pushed out on the margins. They just don't fit. Maybe it's time for us to take some serious risks and change everything. Don't just try and, you know, camouflage by painting over the top of the rust, so to speak. It will break out again, but to do something very deep and meaningful and to become risky people again, to risk for the kingdom, to risk, as obviously those folk did who are spoken about, who risked their lives for the gospel and were, you know, beheaded and cut in two and all that sort of stuff. I think in Hebrews, isn't it? Talks about it. Pretty hectic stuff. Here we are, folks. What are we going to do? Here we are in the 21st century in 2021. Are we going to make a difference and take some risks? What's your thoughts? Let me know. I'd love to hear some feedback because I'm sure there's plenty of you that are risk takers. I know it's not valued and welcomed within the mainstream, but the mainstream is no longer the stream. It's a stream. The river is the mainstream, and the river is the river of God through the Holy Spirit. Let's take some risks together, folk, and see what's going to happen. Thanks for listening.